Hey y'all, Infinite Enzo from Knox Knife Mods here, and today we're checking out the Kizer Kobold 2, designed by Sebastian Irawan. Let's get into it. Alright y'all, the Kizer Kobold 2. I'm just going to come right out and say it. This is a contender for Knife of the Year for me. This thing is awesome. So it's coming in around $89, and to be a sub $100 knife, this thing is really punching above its pay grade. So first off, let's get started with these specs. We have a blade length of 3.6 inches here in 154 cm, and that is one of Kizer's most well-implemented steels. Kizer does an excellent job working with their 154 cm. The heat treats are on point, and they're very experienced with it, so I'm always happy to see a blade in 154. I can also say that our good brother Wolfman Walsh, that's his favorite steel, and when it's coming from Kizer, you know you're getting a quality version of 154 cm. And what's great about Kizer is they also use a lot of other steels. They're not afraid to experiment, kind of similar to the way Spyderco is. You've got 3V in their lineup, you've got S35VN, you've got BD1, and a slew of other steels. N690 is another one. I think they might have Nitro V as well. So anyways, my point being, Kizer is excellent when it comes to their steels, and particularly they are well known for how they implement 154 cm. So as I said, blade length is 3.6, handle length is 4.5 inches. So you have a nice big handle here, plenty of room to get a 4-finger grip. We also have a bit of a forward finger choil here. I'm not using it so much myself when I'm handling this knife just because it does get you fairly close to that cutting edge, which is a little hairy for me, so I tend to not use it. It just feels wonderful in the standard saber grip anyway. Also feels great in a hammer grip. And our handle thickness is about 1/2 inch. That of course is contributing to how well it feels, in addition to the fact that we have heavily milled sections on the micarta handle here. Now it's not actually radiused, it is a flat surface on the top of the handle, but those milling sections are so pronounced that for all intents and purposes it feels like a rounded handle when you're using it. The texture of the micarta is very nice too. It's not chalky like I've experienced, particularly I've experienced that with Civivi. I find their micarta to be kind of chalky. This doesn't feel that way. It feels nice and fabricy, very comfortable in hand. And of course when micarta gets wet, it becomes even grippier. So it's an excellent material, and as always, Kizer has implemented it here very well. Our color here is kind of this gray-green color. I think they call it green, but to me it's a little bit of both. And I think it's a really attractive color. For a little while there, I was debating whether I wanted to dye it because a light shade like this can dye very easily. But I don't know, it's already an attractive color, and I think it goes well with the satin finish steel over here. I just think it looks great. And we have a backspacer here as well, a kind of micro-jimped micarta backspacer here. I think that looks great. There's a lanyard post. You'll also notice that we have full steel liners throughout. They are skeletonized, if you can see the skeletonization in there. So it is going to be heavy, not terribly heavy though. Not as lightweight as a Spyderco and FRN or something like that, but it's a little chunky, it's a little bit heavy, but I don't know, I love it. I like big heavy knives, so I'm a little bit biased, but I don't think it's anything that's going to pull your pants down, for lack of a better way of putting it. We have a deep carry clip as well, so that kind of helps it hide away, though it will take up space in your pocket where it's sitting, just due to that 1/2 inch of thickness. Now let's talk about the deployment methods here. As you can see, we have a lot going on. We've got a nice deployment hole here. My favorite way to open this knife is using that thumb hole. I think it's so satisfying to open the knife that way. Not to mention that we have this nice thick liner lock. If you're going to do a liner lock, this is the way to do it. This big sturdy locking leaf. It just feels great. It's great to disengage. Look at that action. My word. We can also middle finger deploy it, no problem. And there's one more way, which I'm sure you've noticed. Look at that giant protuberance. Guys, what do we call the area that you use to front flip a knife? I mean, obviously with a standard flipper, it's a flipper tab. With a hole, it's a deployment hole. With thumb studs, it's thumb studs. What is this? A forehead? I don't know, guys. Maybe I'm just not thinking of it. Maybe I'm having a brain fart, but I really can't think off the top of my head what we call this section. Anyway, it has a nice, very pronounced area to front flip, and it works really well, in addition to the fact that it has very utilitarian micro jimping that really lends itself to the proper purchase that you need to front flip a knife. This is the best front flipping knife that I own. I have only misfired it one time, and that was more on me than anything else. One other design aesthetic while we're here that I want to point out is the fact that we have some sort of stylistic milling done here as well, and it continues from the blade at the thumb hole onto the cutout here on the micarta. So very cool stylistic touch. And what's interesting to me is that Sebastian Irawan, he is from, if I'm not mistaken, he's from Indonesia. And this knife has some design cues that began in the Kobold 1, which I'll drop a photo in here. That knife was 3 inches on the blade. It was a full titanium with, I think, an S35V in blade. Much smaller knife. I prefer the Kobold 2 just because I generally like larger knives. But the design language there continued into this knife. And furthermore, it's somewhat similar to the design language on the WE Vision R designed by Snex. I believe Snex is based out of Malaysia. So what I'm really interested in here is this a stylistic language that is kind of a cultural thing in Southeast Asia. I know Malaysia and Indonesia aren't the same countries, but you know, they're from the same region of the world. So I'm very curious. I want to do some more digging, find out if that's kind of a cultural touchstone, a cultural design language. But in any case, both of these knives are very beautiful to me. I love their lines, I love their aesthetics, and it's cool to me to see those patterns. I don't think either one of these is referential of each other. I think they're both very much their own unique designs. The size here, this is a fair size comparison. The Kobold is a little bit longer than the Vision R, and the Kobold definitely has a thicker handle. It's a little bit heavier, however, it is more comfortable, and it is also more ergonomic to me than the Vision R. A lot of that, of course, is due to the heavy milling that we have on the handle. But both excellent knives, both very cool designs. Last but not least, one thing I wanted to talk about, and I shouldn't say last because I got a couple more topics. One of my favorite things about this knife is the sound. I'm not sure how well that's going to come through on the camera, but this knife sounds so nice when you deploy it. Nice affirmative click from that liner lock, and on the close, there's almost this like little ting, like this little ringing sound that you get, and I'm not sure what aspect is causing that, but God, look at that action. I just love it. Obviously, the action is based on these on these bearings in the pivot. It's not washers, it is bearings. You're not going to get an action like that on washers unless it's a custom knife. But good grief, that action is absurd. Again, I'm going to repeat it. Misfire there, sorry about that. Sub $100. I just can't get over it. Very nice. As far as cutting performance goes, I was very impressed. This sliced cardboard like it was butter, just cut right through it. It sliced food wonderfully, and it does lend itself to being a food prep knife in the way that the handle is lifted up from the blade from the rest of the design. So it's great for getting down on a cutting board and doing those rocking cuts. Now it's not perfectly done if you were wanting to do a food prep knife, but still, it's definitely going to work well for that. Furthermore, the blade shape really lends itself to that. We have a nice thin stock. I believe this is about 1/8 of an inch thick, but behind the edge it is quite thin and what appears to be a hollow grind if my eyes aren't lying to me. But yeah, very slicey, very thin behind the edge, definitely ready to do your cutting tasks, whether it is cardboard, whether it is wood processing, whether it is food prep. You're going to be satisfied with the way this knife performs. But for me, it's just a wonderful all-around EDC knife. Now, I totally understand if you want your knives thinner, lighter than this. I totally understand. I've always been comfortable with a larger knife, and this is no exception. I think this knife really strides the balance between performance and everyday carry. I think it's really well done for that. So anyway, guys, in closing, thank you all for joining me today. We're always happy to see you guys here. Always appreciate you stopping by for a new video. And until next time, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Please comment below. Let us know what you think of this knife. If there's anything in that price range that you think can compete with the Kobold 2, we'd love to hear about it. The whole point of these videos is that we get as much information out to our fellow knife people as possible. And one last point I want to bring up. You guys know I'm a big nerd. Kobold is a really cool name. Mr. Irawan, great name, sir. So what a kobold is a creature type that originally I think began in Dungeons and Dragons. The word itself is much older than that. It's a classic medieval word, but a kobold in those fantasy universes such as Dungeons and Dragons and Final Fantasy, it's a dog-like humanoid creature. If I can find a photo of a kobold, I'll pop one in, and I think it really suits this knife. I think this funky design really goes well with the name Kobold. So just wanted to give one more shout out to Mr. Irawan for coming up with a great name and not just another series of numbers. Well done, sir. Anyway, guys, in closing, that was the Kobold 2, and we will see you next time.